Joining us today to discuss all of this is Emmanuel Leyco. He's the President and Chief Economist of Credit Rating and Investor Services Philippines, as well as Senior Fellow at the Center for People Empowerment and Governance, or the CENPEG. Good morning, Prof. Very good to see you.
Good morning, Danny, and thanks for having me back, and good to see you again.
Prof, difficult times for us to be discussing right now, but let's put the focus for a moment here on the impact on the domestic economy here in the Philippines. Give us your 2 cents, very quick 2 cents on how vulnerable the economy is right now, and also in the immediate term to a prolonged spike in global oil prices, which we are already starting to see.
Well, immediately, the supply concerns of fuel will be a major issue, and that will lead definitely to substantial increases in fuel prices at the pump when consumers go to refuel, and therefore for the households, for the driving community, the passengers, the fuel prices will be immediately felt. And that will be, again, felt in the supermarket when prices of prime commodities that we mostly import will also increase. Definitely, the immediate concern here will be inflation, and that has to be a top-line concern for the government to consider.
They are, in fact, having emergency meetings right now at the Department of Energy. There are proposals to cut the excise tax. Is this going to do much? What can be done at this stage? Let's just focus on the pump prices. Can this actually be contained for the time being?
I don't think so. Already today, more than a peso increase was already imposed, and we've seen that in the fuel prices. And last night, we already saw long lines of cars, vehicles trying to get fuel. And that is without the impact of the Iran war, the U.S.-Israel war against Iran. So already, if you look at the oil prices in the world market, immediately it jumped 10%. And the concern is it could go up as high as $100 per barrel, even up to $120 per barrel. And that will be devastating for our economy.
Prof, this is not the first time we've seen this type of conflicts in the Middle East. We are very well aware that we are one of the countries with a very high import dependence on fuel, particularly crude from Saudi Arabia. Do we have contingency plans in place? This was something that could have happened already. And do we have enough reserves to cushion the blow?
The requirement is for the fuel companies or for the industry to have the 30-day reserve. Mm-hmm. Now, would a 30-day reserve be enough? And it looks like listening from the press releases or press conferences of the U.S. government, it doesn't look like 4 to 6 weeks will be enough to achieve their goals. It doesn't look like, unlike what they did in June, where they said they wanted to disable the nuclear capability of Iran. It makes people wonder, why do they have to come back now? It looks like they were not able to do what they said they will do in June, and now people are still wondering if they were able to do what they wanted to do in the raids that they did over the weekend. So I think we're in here for the long haul, which I think will be serious, will create a major impact on our economy. We hope that it does not last a day longer, but listening from the policymakers, decision makers in the U.S., it doesn't look like it will be so after 4 to 5 weeks.
Prof, do you have any indication on what this could do to inflation and the peso? What's your prediction
Well,
here?
okay, definitely. Inflation will exceed targets. Right now, or the numbers that they will bring out in the next few days will not reflect the current conflict yet.
Situation.
So already we are anticipating that it will be an increased inflation. It will be a faster inflation, but it will still be within targets. It will still be, I think, within the or below 2.5%. But with
Okay.
the conflict in the Middle East right now, it will be easy to say that the inflation targets will exceed 2.5%, and even approach 3% if the conflict extends beyond a month,
Okay.
as what we have been hearing now.
We have the BSP has its next session to discuss what was expected to be an imminent rate cut for the current easing cycle on April. Is this going to impact that? What's your projection there? As you mentioned, inflation is still lower or within target, at least for the foreseeable future until this starts to penetrate the economy.
Well, the BSP governor already said during his one of his press conferences that the monetary policy can only do so much to stimulate the economy. The growth rate declining last year to 4.4%, which is way below target, was already a major indicator. It was a concern. We were expecting 5.5%, and we finished the year with 4.4%. Monetary policy, and the governor is right in saying that monetary policy can only do so much. Now that inflation is there's a major risk that inflation will be affected by the conflict in the Middle East. I don't think the BSP will be in the mood to further lower interest rate, and therefore at 4.25%, I think that will be it for the rest of the period when the Middle East conflict, while the Middle East conflict continues.
I'm quite afraid to ask what your growth projections are at this point. As you mentioned, no, already before this even happened, you already had Governor Eli saying 4.6% for 2026, well below a 5 to 6% government target. What are we going to be seeing now?
You know, risk analysts have always been focusing on internal shocks, and that means the fiscal shocks, the fiscal discipline, the corruption that we are seeing now, and we are not even factoring in any major disruption externally. Now that we are seeing that, it's like a double whammy now. We have internal issues that we are dealing with. Now we have a much larger issue to deal with insofar as our fuel supply is concerned, and the expected global inflationary impact that it can cause. So earlier we were looking at maybe just to duplicate what happened last year if nothing is
Okay.
done by the government, 4.4%. But with this kind of shocks, external shocks happening right now, I think we will go below 4.4% for this year.
Can you compare how insulated or exposed we are compared to the rest of the region or our peers, and how will we be growing? Because I mean, regardless of the growth story last year, they still say that we nevertheless grew at least better than some of our neighbors. No, it was a global growth slowdown, and we still managed to beat some of them. What's the story going to be this year?
Well, region-wide, I think the impact will be felt, particularly China, Japan, and even our neighboring countries, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam. We will all be in the same boat. However, because our economy has not grown at a much faster rate than we have expected, the impact on our people will be very much felt. Remember, 40 years ago, just last week, we were comparing our economies to Vietnam and Indonesia. We were doing much better than them. In terms of per capita income, we exceeded those of Vietnam and Indonesia. 40 years later, and I think the reference point was that 1986, the EDSA revolution, they have already exceeded us. So, in terms of comparing how the impact will affect the Philippines and our neighboring countries, I think we will be affected much more than our neighbors.
Let's shift the focus towards our kababayans in the region. 2.5 million. Once again, 2.5 million Filipinos are in the Middle East. There are calls for repatriation. People are hopefully going to be repatriated and back to safety. What does that mean for these people that will be losing their main source of income for their families, and also that windfall of remittances to the country?
Exactly. Over $3 billion a month are sent to the Philippines. No? Of course, the big chunk of it comes from our U.S.
You mean globally? Okay.
Professionals. Yes, globally we get 3.4%. And next to the U.S., the major remittances come from the Middle East and some here in Asia. But remember, our remittances represent about 8% of our GDP. That will be a big cut to our GDP and to the households. Last year, household spending already slowed down. Consumer spending slowed down. With this new development, the household spending, I think, will further slow down, and that will really affect the GDP growth rate for this quarter.
Is this going to have a big structural impact on the OFWs in that region? Are we really going to be seeing a decline over time as this conflict unfolds, or the region becomes very tricky? Or do you feel that this is just a contained situation, and then when things are stabilized, they can go back to their jobs? Have you seen something like this already happen? Especially if there have been wars in the Middle East. There was already this issue just last year. So resilient ba ang mga trabaho ng mga kababayan natin doon?
In the past, we were only seeing these issues happening in Israel, in Lebanon, but now it's region-wide. And our kababayans are hearing explosions on a daily basis.
Yeah.
They themselves are terrified, and many Filipinos are now wanting to come back. So is it going to be
normal na nga eh.
temporary? I don't think so. The U.S. president is saying it could last more than 4 to 6 weeks. And before that happens, a lot of Filipinos will already want to come back to the Philippines.
For good even, and perhaps not take the risk to go there. Sir, what immediate steps should the government be taking right now from an economic standpoint to cushion this blow? There's already, as you mentioned, there were internal issues that needed to be done. There's already just simply the catch-up government spending plan that has to be put in place, from since November's GDP print. Tell us what can be done more pa at this stage to cushion the blow.
Conserving oil or fuel consumption would be top of mind right now, particularly for the government. Limit our movements to essential steps only. And perhaps right now they can already say you can do more work from home, and but that will not really affect the total economy. But those are things that can help, but not really much. The other thing that the government may consider right now is, the excise tax can be suspended, value-added tax can be suspended, and make sure that its social protection is more evenly distributed to our people. Right now, we're focusing on the poorest of the poor, but the government is now facing challenges that, hey, the poorest of the poor are poor, but there are also middle classes, so-called middle classes, that need government support. So the government is really faced with big challenges right now to make sure that the requirements of our people are met.
Sir, what indicators are you looking at when it comes to consumption? Because as you mentioned, when we look at, especially just as a person looking in the financial markets, at corporate earnings, parang okay naman the earnings that are being released, that it seems that people are spending, people are going to malls, you have profits still, especially food and restaurants are full. Anecdotally, parang okay naman. But are you seeing that tapering off? Are people going to be more stringent with their wallets this year, or are Filipinos continuing to spend?
Well, actually, when we looked at the household spending slowed down last year, particularly in the fourth quarter. We were expecting that there will be a resurgence of spending by the households during the last quarter, particularly as Christmas spending, the holiday spending came in. But that's not what we saw. I think
Yeah.
Prominent in the minds of our people was that there's so much corruption going on. The GDP, the economy is slowing down, and therefore they were trying to preserve or save something for
Interesting.
their own use. Yes, for their own protection. So, no, I don't see household spending going back up, particularly with what's happening right now. So, the government will really have to do a lot more to stimulate and protect the economy, particularly those from the bottom portion of our population. Remember, while the economy is growing, the growth of the economy is not exactly spread out. Capital gains are, I think, evident. They are able to show that the major companies are showing bigger profits. However, the salaries, the purchasing power of our people have not really gone up. In fact, it has been eroded over the years. So there is an uneven distribution of growth that we are seeing right now. The big businesses are okay. So the GDP growth rate is okay. It's well received. But for the common people who have no capital, who are basically your day-to-day minimum wage earners, are not celebrating the growth of the economy.
Are there bright spots, Prof?
That is a very difficult question answer right now. Bright spots will be probably now that we are seeing the vulnerabilities of a strategy that was only supposed to be short term. Remember, the OFW phenomenon in the 80s was only, or the 70s, was only meant to provide a stopgap. Our people were graduating from college, entering the job market, but the Philippine economy was not able to create enough jobs to accommodate them. And
Yeah.
then the boom, or the economic boom happening in the Middle East at that time, provided an opportunity for the government to respond to that requirement to create jobs locally for our people. So in the meantime, they sent our OFWs to the Middle East, but that was meant to be a stopgap. Unfortunately, that has become a permanent fixture in our economic strategy, at least by the government. So right now, you have more than 2 million in the Middle East, millions more elsewhere. OFW remittances have become a major push for our GDP growth, without which our own spending, our household spending, if it only relies on minimum wages that our people get from their employers, will not be enough. So I think the realization of the vulnerabilities of OFWs or our labor migration will have to say or be realized by our policymakers that this is not a stable, this is not a reliable strategy on the part of our nation. We have to create jobs locally. We have to strengthen our agriculture. We have to strengthen and revisit our industries. We need to have local industries that can be more competitive, industries that can provide for our needs, agriculture that can feed our people. Except, and stop thinking about importing food. Right now, we are the biggest rice importer globally. That has to stop. We have to strengthen our own agricultural production. The agricultural base of our industries will have to be established.
Prof, last question on that same point. I know it's not the best situation right now, but perhaps it could be a possibility, as you mentioned, for the brain drain to reverse and for us to get back such talented people from the Middle East back into the country. Could we perhaps see that as a positive gain for the economy?
Oh, definitely. Our people in the Middle East coming back here, most of them are in healthcare. Our healthcare industry or healthcare sector can be supported by that, but the government will have to do its part. Our people coming back without jobs will be a pointless thing to consider. We have to create jobs for them. And AI being the headline story in the economy, I think many of them are also working in IT, in information
Correct.
technology, or many of them can be retrained. But we have to have a strategy. We need to have a clear vision now how we can push for Philippine development without over-relying on foreign economies to prop up our economy.
These are indeed fragile times. Thank you, Prof. Emmanuel Leyco, President and Chief Economist of Credit Rating and Investor Services Philippines and Senior Fellow over at CENPEC. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.